So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Talks at the COP26. We are here in the Nordic Hub in Helsinki, and we have a link also to Glasgow. And of course, this event is also streamed online. Our topic today is Nordic Baltic countries sharpen their climate financing NIB to launch a new sustainability policy. Last week at COP meeting in Glasgow, there was a session. We had a session together with the Finnish Finance Minister Annika Saarikko, and we discussed the role of governments and the IFIs in fighting the climate change. And the message was very clear: the countries should do more. And this, of course, includes the international financial institutions which are owned by the member countries. And how are the IFIs doing this? Of course, they are financing projects. But in order to find the right projects and to get guidance and to know where to look for the projects, IFIs need policies. And at this event, we are going to showcase one of such policies, and that's the sustainability policy. This is a policy which is now in force after a public consultation of 30 days. In our governing structure, such policies are actually discussed and agreed on at the board level. At this event, we are going to have 3 participants. We will have Julie Sonne, who is a member of our board, and she will, of course, give us the boardroom view on the sustainability policy. So welcome.
Thank you.
Then we have Luca De Lorenzo, who is our head of sustainability. And of course, he has been holding the pen, creating this sustainability policy. And in Glasgow, we have Sean Kidney. He's there, great, because last time when we were trying to contact you, you were making your way to the pavilion. So we are really happy to see you there. So we were there last week. We know that there is quite a lot of going on. But I think we would start now with Julia Sonne giving the views from the boardroom, that why are these policies so important? What are they actually, and etc. So please.
Well, thank you, Jukka, and thanks for the opportunity. And thank you to all of you for joining us today for the launch of the new sustainability policy of the Nordic Investment Bank. And this is something we've been working on for quite a while, and I can safely say that in the NIB, both the board, the management and the staff are very happy to present what we believe is both an ambitious but also a workable sustainability policy for all of NIB's activities. I guess we all know, and particularly those who've been in Glasgow, I haven't, unfortunately, but I'm sure it's obvious to everyone that we have a massive task ahead of us if we are to solve the climate crisis. And as an investment bank owned by the Nordic Baltic countries, it's important to us to do our bit to support the decarbonization plans of our members. And if we look around, even in the Nordic Baltics, it's quite evident that change is needed. Now, what we want to do in the NIB is to help facilitate that change. Change in our Nordic Baltic societies and in our Nordic Baltic businesses, and hopefully also to inspire, to develop new solutions that can support change beyond our own geography. Because we also want to promote a global change towards green, sustainable growth. And for us, this means, and we believe it must mean, that a change must come in all aspects on how we do business in the NIB. And this is reflected in our new policy. Luca will tell you more about it in a minute. And specifically, and often this is where we get a lot of interest from the public and the NGOs, it means that there are some types of projects that the NIB will not finance. Most importantly, we will not finance energy production based on fossil fuels, or the extraction of production facilities and so on for fossil fuels. And actually, we've been operating along these lines in the Nordic Investment Bank for some years, and now this has been explicitly formulated in our sustainability policy. But maybe more importantly, our new policy also means that we want to engage even more proactively with our clients in other sectors than energy production to support their transition efforts. Because this task of transition that we have ahead of us, it's enormous. And it's not only about new types of energy production, the windmill parks, the battery factories. I mean, these are all important, but we also want to focus on the hard-to-abate sectors. It's not the easiest projects or the easiest companies to finance for a bank like the Nordic Investment Bank, but they are absolutely necessary to reach if we are to succeed in transforming our societies and creating the basis for this green, sustainable growth that we want to achieve. So what we want to do is to commit ourselves to being proactive in our dialogue with clients, to look at their entire business model, their value chains, when we assess a financing proposal. And obviously with the objective that clients, they have or develop a very clear, robust, credible strategy towards decarbonization. And this is how we have formulated our objectives, so very broadly speaking, as a green bank committed to sustainable financing. And what is more, we also actually believe it's good business for us and for our clients, because the growth of the future is green. And with this approach, we believe that we can play our part in supporting the transition we need to see in the coming decade.
Thank you, Julia. I have one question to you, because you have long experience in sitting in the boards of not only the NIB board, but other IFRs as well. What is your experience? How has the discussion around these issues, the sustainability policies, developed over the, let's say, 10 years? Has it changed?
Oh, it's changed a lot. Maybe not that much in the Nordic Investment Bank, actually, but I will say almost 10 years ago, when I sort of started working with the financial sector, the only place people were talking about green financing and sustainability, that was when I came to Helsinki to the board meetings in the NIB. Everywhere else, it was all about managing the consequences of the financial crisis, how to create a stable banking sector, etc. And these were all obviously good points, but it was just, honestly, it wasn't that much on the agenda. And now, happily, this is no longer the case. Green financing has become the new black, what to say. It's all over the place. And I think what is very good is that the Nordic Investment Bank has been working on this for so long that we have a very good starting point for going out in the market with the products, setting the standards, because it's also a little bit of the Wild West in many instances. So I think actually there we have an important role to play in this change that is coming about. Maybe the most important change I will help facilitate in my career. So it's fascinating to see it happening.
All right, thank you, Julia. So now I think we will go into the policy as such, and we have our head of sustainability and mandate, Luca De Lorenzo, who will introduce actually what are the key points in the policy. So Luca, what's new?
Yeah, thank you, Jukka. Welcome everybody, and thank you, Julie, for setting the scene. As you say, basically in the new policy, first of all, the starting point for NIB is already quite good. So we have built the new policy on the foundation of what we have worked on over the last years, right? For sure. But at the same time, we recognize it's 2021. Things are moving around NIB, in NIB. The task ahead is ever so difficult and challenging. So we needed an upgrade. And that's basically what this new policy is trying to do. The structure itself of the document, I'm going to try and put some meat to it. Of course, it is a policy. So ultimately, I would recommend you to have a look at it and read it. But now I'll try to walk through the logic and how it's structured. We kept it quite simple because we think it's important to have clear and simple messages when it comes to the transition and the task that we have ahead. It basically clearly states our ambition levels and our commitments. It defines our assessments and how we want to get there. And let's be honest, also our red lines. So what we have decided actually we will not touch. So first of all, it reinforces our commitments to delivering the Paris Agreement let me remind you, it's 6 years old, okay? And our support as NIB to our member countries in delivering all of the commitments towards Paris Agreement. Of course, it's also wider than that. So we look at contributing broadly to the SDG agenda. So we include much more than just climate in our sustainability definition. And maybe something more dear to us, but it's protection of the Baltic Sea. And so water management and water resources also appears heavily in our policy. Basically, it defines what we think sustainability is in 2021. Okay. Secondly, it recognizes that we're running out of time, just as you're saying, Julie. So we need to really step up the efforts to decarbonize our energy sector in specific. So we have taken a much clearer and stronger stance towards fossil fuel use in energy generation. Very simply, we are not going to finance projects that use fossil fuels for energy generation. And those are on the project side. But we're also going to look at clients and their fundamental business model. And so if your activity is or your business significantly implies use of fossil fuel, also we will have a hard time working with you. Okay. But then we recognize also that that's energy, but that's not enough. We are 2021, we are entering a transition decade. There are many sectors where we have fossil fuel dependence still, also in our member region. These are what you mentioned, hard to abate sectors. So a lot of industries still use fossil fuels, cement, steel, chemicals, a lot of transport. We're working on the light vehicles. Maybe we'll get electric there pretty quickly, but aviation and shipping, still challenging, right? In these areas, we are not going to have an exclusion approach, but we're going to have a much stronger engagement and let's say testing the robustness of the climate strategies of our clients. We're really going to ask them, how are you going to change? How are you going to transition? Show us, yeah? And match that to the Paris alignment type of targets. And if that's the case, we're going to support with our financing to do that transition. And that's good, but we can expand that further to the economy. So here we have energy, fossil fuels, hard to abate sectors. But actually, again, we are 2021, we need sustainability and transition to happen across the entire economy. And there we are strengthening, as defined in the policy, our ESG performance assessments of the business models of our clients. And so here we introduce not only climate-associated things with fossil fuels, but I'm thinking about more circular economy type of business models, resource efficiency, and we need these throughout all the sectors. And as NIB, we operate and finance all sectors of the economy. So that's another strong element. That's all good. Another new thing for the policy is that it will be a bank-wide policy. So what I've just mentioned will apply to all our operations. Our lending operations, which of course are the main ones, but also our treasury activities where we have substantial investments, and also, although smaller, our own internal operations. So how we run and conduct business. It also, the policy recognizes that all of this and the transition needs to happen considering the societal impacts that these transitions will have, which is very important and very dear, I think, to our Nordic Baltic owners. We believe that it's only in well-functioning societies that we can have and manage this transition. Otherwise, we might risk backflash.
I'm looking the right direction. That video.
No, that's Sean. But basically, it's only if people have trust in the institutions, in our clients, in the governments, that we are actually going to succeed in delivering the transition. So we look at that very carefully in our policy as well. Let me try and conclude here a little bit by saying maybe, we are launching a sustainability policy. Ultimately, I am aware that it is a piece of paper. It's a document, right? So sure, it's a great day. I'm very proud of it. And I think we are. But ultimately, as a financial institution, we will be judged based on how we act and how we actually place our financing. And that's actually what we should be judged on. Not only NIB, but I think all of the financial players. But anyways, we do think having a strong governance and clear documentations will impact our daily operations and decision making. So I'm really looking forward to this being now in force and therefore impacting the way we make our decision makings at NIB and therefore having impact in the transition that has to come.
Okay,
Over to you, Luca.
Thank you, Luca. We'll soon actually take in Sean Keatley from Glasgow, but before that I have one question, that there was this public consultation period and there were some comments that NIB received. Could you just give a short overview that which were these comments, what kind of comments, and what was your response?
Yeah, absolutely. We received a few comments, primarily some from our investors, actually. So in our own green bond program, or NIB environmental bonds, as we call them, and some others from other banks. So let's say colleagues of ours. And we even got a question or a comment from some academic, universities, of course, which is starting more and more to look at sustainability issues. Overall, they were appreciative. I think the main comment was around, are you not going to set some climate targets or some sort of clear climate strategy? We touch upon it in the sustainability policy. We are working actively on better understanding our carbon footprint at portfolio level. We're signatories to the TCFD and we're working on a climate strategy. So we're taking that part of the equation further next year.
All right, thank you, Luca. And now I will move to Glasgow. Our sort of friend and guest speaker is there, Sean Keatley from the Climate Bond Initiative. Maybe I could ask you, before you can introduce your institution and comment on our policy, I would just like to ask you the same question that I asked the minister, that how do you judge the state of negotiations there at COP, and what is your general feeling about the progress there?
I have to say two things first. Apologies to Luca for interrupting. It's chaotic at COP. It's chaotic. People everywhere.
Okay.
One. Two, I am so excited by the NIB sustainability strategy. I just want to say congratulations. 1.5 degrees Celsius alignment, absolutely correct. No fossil fuels, it makes my heart sing. And knowledge sharing. Why? Because there are 500 development banks in the world and they all need help. So when you say knowledge sharing, I'm after that being knowledge sharing to all the development banks in the world, not just to the Nordic community. There's so much to be done about that. And the Nordic community has been a leader in green finance. Sweden was the first substantial investor in green bonds in the area I work in, and still has the highest per capita investment in green bonds. So let me leave, that's why I'm so excited. But to answer your question, my apologies. You know, it is amazing to be back in the negotiations after a 2-year gap, and the amazing festival of ideas that is the COP. As Luca knows when he was here last week, there are so many interesting conversations you can have in 10 minutes all around. And you know, that's important, because when we have to move fast, and there is absolutely no doubt that our economy and our society has to move very fast to change the world in the next 8 years, we have 8 years, you need to be able to connect and to solve things and to work out things fast. These meetings are important. But I don't know about I'm not sure I'm going to say a lot about the government negotiations, Article 6, etc. It's complicated. We will find out probably on Saturday morning at 5 a.m. where that's ended up. I can say some of the country delegations are a bit depressed from emerging markets. Such is life. But you know, I don't expect a lot out of the formal negotiations. What I'm concerned about are the kinds of statements coming from the major economies, from the US, Europe, and China. We've seen the GFAN announcement, $130 trillion of investment, saying, we want green, give it to us. That is incredibly important. We've seen the common ground taxonomy between China and Europe. And as you might know, I've been one of the architects of the EU taxonomy. We're bringing the two markets together, and we'll have other markets coming together too, in common definitions about what is green, in line with the NIB. We've seen the Russian Development Bank yesterday confirm that their taxonomy, passed by the Duma in September, is consistent with the European taxonomy and excludes gas. Luca will know what I mean by that. And then we saw last night the US-China announcement about cooperation. These two big giants are fighting like cats and dogs, but on green, they're cooperating. That's what I consider important. This COP, the first COP ever, dominated by finance, which is the way it needs to be.
Great, Sean. Could you now dive a little bit deeper into our sustainability policy?
Well, sorry, you want Luca too or me too? Audio is terrible.
I would like to hear your views on more of your views on our sustainability policy.
Look, I'm just going to say, as I said before, I am incredibly excited to see something that commits to the 1.5, that reinforces the importance of long-term finance. You know, we have a problem in our society. Let's be clear. We have short-termism dominating decisions at a time we must have long-termism. So the reinforcement of that mission by NIB is really important in the face of corporate short-term capture, in the face of political capture by short-term interests. I mean, God knows, look at the US, 2-year terms in Congress. How the hell can you deal with climate change and that? We need our financial institutions who have a fiduciary responsibility to look at the long term to counter the pressure for short term in other parts of societies. And that includes NIB. Also, it includes Munifin. It includes the pension funds and insurance funds in that world. So that part of it is fantastic. I also applaud the commitment to new instruments. We need more work, more diversity, and already NIB has been a leader in green bond issuance, of course. Well, what can I say? The Baltic needs fixing. So that particular focus is clearly important, but I expect no less from NIB. I think what I'd like to say most of all is that the idea of converting the whole of NIB to have a sustainability focus, the idea of taking this right through the lending programs, the operations, is something that every development bank needs to do. It's urgent. So when I talk about the importance of knowledge sharing, I really want you to share that knowledge and how it goes.
You actually mentioned the EU taxonomy. Maybe I have a question to Luca. I got that actually just before this session, that how is the sustainability policy related with this EU taxonomy?
Well, of course, the EU taxonomy is a growing reference point, and Sean can speak to that as well, as he has been heavily involved in defining it. So we have used that definitely as a reference as well in defining the policy. It's not directly linked yet, as the taxonomy will also evolve. As NIB, we are ourselves now mapping basically our activities and our portfolio to the EU taxonomy. And various thresholds, and understanding how how taxonomy aligned, let's say, we are, and then based on that, to be honest, we will see how more and more we can use it actually as a core reference. And I think, as Sean was mentioning, see also if we can play a role in showing how it can be implemented, and then in that sense share knowledge then with other institutions. So that's a little bit our approach to the EU taxonomy.
Sean, do you have a comment on this from Glasgow?
Well, the EU taxonomy is a tough and messy project at the moment. I want everyone to understand we are in the middle of designing an electric car. It's complicated. There's wiring everywhere. When we've finished, the goal is you'll be able to get in, press a button and drive off. But it's not finished yet. The Council of Europe has not signed off on it and so on. So there's a little bit of work still to be done in that area. But NIB, yes, as far as I can see, is fully aligned for taxonomy development. The taxonomy is very important because where we end up is a very simple shopping list for the finance sector, for banks and corporations. And, simplicity grows markets. If we can make this relatively simple in the use by the time we're finished, we will turbocharge this large market. But there are fights to be had. I'm going to say with my friends in Finland, we've got a fight on forestry criteria we've got to have. That's next year's job. In our friends in Poland, we've got to fight on agricultural criteria. That's next year's job. But this is necessary because for the last 30 years, we have been taking what the scientists say, oh, it's really bad, yes. What about we just do this? Will that be okay? And that's a national climate change plan, and they have not been good enough, which is why we've got such a problem. The taxonomy is forcing us to address the gap between national politically mediated climate change plans and what the science says. So that's why we're having these arguments. They're overdue, they're necessary, we will resolve them, and we will resolve them in a way where we harmonise with all the other markets in the world, as we've just done with China. So it's a very important development.
All right, thank you. Is there any question from Glasgow or from here? Yes, there's one question. Please, maybe you could introduce yourself first.
Yes. My name is Max Bonnier Eklund from Sweden, key listener here at the Nordic Hub of COP26. And as we all know, with the taxonomy, we had our issues with the forestry sector here in Sweden and in Finland and in the Baltic states as well. So my question to you guys at NIB is that, what are we thinking about the forestry methods and biofuels and this kind of dead-end industry that we're having here in the Nordic region that we all are using to actually reach net zero emissions? But the thing is, like, if we only have 8 years, biofuels won't reduce the emissions anyways. They will just increase them. The atmosphere doesn't make a difference between a black or a green CO2 emission molecule. So how are we gonna go and invest? No, sorry, let me repeat that. Are you guys gonna invest in any biofuel or forestry companies in the future, or is that also on the blacklist as well as fossil fuel companies?
Okay, maybe Luca takes this.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll try to. So in the policy, you won't have that explicit, right? So there, it's one of the sectors where we will have to assess, because of also how Sean described it. It does vary and it does depend, and you really need to be specific. Our general approach is I would say, a cascading approach. So the first biomass in itself is potentially climate neutral, depending how you define it, right? Depending how you resource your biomass. So that's one thing we would always look at. It's where is it coming from? And then also what you use it for, okay? So then there we would say, okay, look, the first thing that we would like to see is that you're actually using for bioproducts stuff, not that you then burn, right? But that you actually use it to substitute something even better. If it's fossil fuel based product, that you then change to a bioproduct. Yeah. Biochemicals, also interesting, right? That would be the next layer down, right? Still, you're not burning them, you're using them, and then you move down the chain where biofuels and bioenergy is at the bottom. So we have a cascading value proposition for biomass. And I think that that's the only way we should be looking at biomass at this stage in time, really, and getting the most value out of it, because it is a valuable resource and we have to use it so.
Okay, you have a follow-up question.
Yes, so will you guys demand that the forestry or like the biomass that you're actually investing in, or the project, that it will come from non-clear-cut forests? Or do you have any demands on the forestry method used for your biomass investment companies?
Could I start? And
yeah.
Maybe you supplement me, because
Please,
you're asking very good questions and relevant questions, and you won't find answers to all of them in the rather short piece of paper that we set out, which makes them fair questions. But as Lucas says, what we want to do is to always assess and to always challenge ourselves. And if you have a very high level of ambition and you want to move people, you need to talk to them about what they're doing, and you need to be willing to look at projects even at board level and have discussions. And as Lucas said, then there are things you could, we have limited resources in the NIB. And if I were to look at these projects, I would probably say, yeah, but there are many projects in the world. Why not go for the better ones? Those where we can make a difference, and maybe some of the others could more easily find their financing elsewhere. Maybe we don't need to be there to make a difference. Maybe we need to be up here where it's a little bit more difficult, perhaps. And so even though you will not see something on the exclusion list, it doesn't mean that we will necessarily do it, because it will always be, in the board, we actually always talk about the specific projects, and the mandate rating discussion, that's what we call it, the green mandate, is always an important part of that. And the mirror of this is also that even though you see something in the exclusion list, and maybe then I could probably not use the NIB. I said, yeah, well, try us. Because if you have an ambitious and credible strategy to change your business, we want to help with that, because that's where you make a change. So that's why it's just not, open the book and say, oh, yes or no. It's a little bit more difficult than that, because we want to make that extra effort. And then Luca can answer the technical question.
Exactly. Maybe coming more precisely, you're having very precise question. So I described to you the product hierarchy. We have the same on the input, right, to whatever technology you might have. So residues first, certified forest, absolutely. Not certified forest, probably not. And then you see the combination. So if you're using residues to do bioproducts, that's probably going to be rated good, something positive. If you're using something else, some other combination, probably not. If you're clear cutting forests to make biofuels, probably not.
All right. Was that exhausted your questions, or?
I could go on all day.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Those were really, really good questions. Sean, do you want to add something on this?
Only that I'm so glad the question was asked, and I'm so glad for clarification, because this has been a source of some controversy. Unfortunately, the forestry regulation that the Commission has brought into the taxonomy did not follow the technical expert group recommendations that I was part of making last year. And let's just say no member states were willing to fight for the slightly tougher rules, which the NIB is pursuing now. But look, that's the argument we will continue to have. And there are many other areas of the rule setting. The key thing is the big capex areas we're in line. With energy, we're in line, as well as transport and property and other sectors. And with how the institution that lends works in future, we're in line. NIB is becoming a full-bore climate bank, and that's what everyone needs to be. That doesn't mean only lending to clean energy. That means every decision you make has to have a climate filter on top, with mitigation and resilience, and it's got to be science-based. That's what we're seeing now. That's what we need to see happen in every development bank. Look, frankly, every bank. I want Nordia to go there too.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any question in Glasgow? Any further questions from here? Okay, then I would take the last question, kind of concluding question, and I will modify it a little bit according to the person who is answering. And I would like to start with Sean, that how do you see these sustainability policies? How much are they kind of carved in stone? How are the IFIs? How often should they revisit these policies? The world is obviously changing.
Well, the world is changing very fast in the wrong direction. So clearly, as if it was a pandemic, we need to be listening to the scientists week by week. We should be studying the science reports week by week and altering course as we go to address what is an existential challenge facing the species, facing the planet going forward. So I am extremely comfortable if anybody says, hang on, we need to make some changes next week and next month, as long as it's science-based and tracking what it is we have to do. That is necessary. But going back to the pandemic, which is after all a crisis of biodiversity, about bat colonies being forced together because of biodiversity destruction and pathogens jumping between species, we have learnt the hard way to really listen to the scientists and act fast. Now, that is exactly the lesson we need for climate change. Listen to our scientists and act, instead of saying, oh, it looks a bit difficult, let's put it off for a few weeks or a few months or a few years, which is what we've done the last 30 years. I'm very happy with the NIB sustainability policy, because for me, that's what it does. This is an improvement on the past. But I want to put out a bigger challenge to you, that what we do in Finland and Sweden and Denmark is just a start. We've already made a lot of progress. Hey, don't get me wrong, there's more to be done. We have to kill all fossil fuels, etc., etc. But what we really need to do is emerging markets, the rest of Europe, and so on. And so that leadership that institutions like NIB take needs to be brought into the European Union, because Europe needs to be a beacon of what we need to do, instead of someone that occasionally muddles between power blocks. We need active engagement by the Scandinavian countries in driving an aggressive European climate agenda implementation that's commensurate with the 2030 goals we have already set. And then we need the Europe with Scandinavian prodding to develop really strong collaboration agreements with the US and China and India. If we do that, we can fix this problem globally. If we get the major economies to collaborate at depth and at substance, we can fix this thing. If we don't, we will not fix it, and there is no future for our children.
Thank you, Sean. Luca, Sean said that these policies could be updated next week if it's needed. How do you see this actually? That how much is this policy kind of really carved in stone and determining what we can finance? Or are there possibilities to have some deviations from the policy? And when do you think the next update will be?
Yeah, well, I mean, the policy is important because it sets out how we want to play, and we should stick to that. Of course, as Julie said, it also leaves space to when it's necessary to have the dialogue with the clients, right? So that is inbuilt in the policy. Of course, as Sean says as well, things are moving very fast. Technology development, we need to be science-based, the ambition levels might ramp up, and also for us, the external references, so EU taxonomy and the likes, the various taxonomies and definitions might be changed. We need to be aware of all of this, keep an eye on all of this, and then maybe at least on a yearly basis, have a look whether there are some things that we need to change. Then we need to be realistic. With all respect to the board member here next to me, to modify these documents in practice does take some time in our organizations. So, the frequency of update needs to be realistic and operationalized. But I would say every few years, and that's actually one of the things we have in the new policy, at least every 3 years, we will have a very close look and see whether we need to update.
All right, thank you. And Julia, how do you see that from the boardroom point of view? When is the next update due?
Well, actually, I think it's been quite a long while since we updated it last, but that isn't to say that we haven't changed the way we work over the past years. So I think Luca made a good point saying the policy is just a piece of paper. In the end, what matters is what you do. And then the policy is very much about communication, about telling the rest of the world and telling our clients what we do. But I would say that you asked what's set in stone. I would say the level of ambition is set in stone. That's rather fixed. But the way to go there, the way to reach it, that we will need to find ways. And I don't know all of them yet. Sometimes I don't know it until I see the project. I think I used a word in my presentation. I don't even know if you can say it in English, but I did it anyways. I called it a workable policy. But what I mean is a policy that works. Something that actually leaves room to find the solutions to deliver on the ambitions. And we have real people out there generating loans, talking to clients, and they need to understand the level of ambition. And if they understand that, then they can use their knowledge and their creativity to find the solutions. That's what we want to create. And I'm sure that we will evolve all the time. And then once in a while, we will redraft our policy. That's more of a consequence of that working process, in my mind.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you, Sean in Glasgow, and thank you, Luca. Now it's time to close this event, and now we have successfully launched our sustainability policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.